She was my everything, until I found out she wasn't just mine. That night changed everything. At my wife's corporate party, I exposed the affair. She was with her boss, they were making love right there. I boiled over, snapped, he begged for mercy, but I wasn't done yet. My name is Jake Harris. I'm 36 years old. I was married to my gorgeous wife for 8 years, she's 34 but could easily pass for 28. We never had kids, although I was ready for it. She, on the other hand, kept putting it off, always saying, "Soon, Jake, soon." Our sex life was fantastic, but honestly, I valued the little moments of affection even more. The kisses, the hugs, that's what I lived for. I always wanted to be near her, feeling calm and loved whenever I held her close. She was always receptive, always available. I felt like the luckiest guy alive. I thought she felt the same way. My biggest mistake was trusting her. Her name is Laura. The love I had for her eventually turned into blinding hatred, and then into a cold, hollow emptiness. People say the opposite of love is indifference, but that doesn't ring true for me. My love transformed into a deep, bone-chilling rage. My soul feels dead now, beyond any hope of recovery. If she were to catch on fire, I'd just sit back, drink in hand, and watch her burn. I wouldn't even spit to put out the flames. You're probably wondering what could possibly turn a kind, loving man into a cold-hearted machine. Well, it all started at the company holiday party 2 years ago. Laura always dressed a bit too provocatively for these events. It never really bothered me much. When she dressed that way, she got a lot of attention from other men, and I took it as a compliment that the most attractive woman there was mine. That night, she wore a dress that left little to the imagination. I felt like I was married to a living, breathing fantasy. But I found myself questioning who she was trying to impress. Normally, I'm not the jealous type, but what's mine is mine, and as long as there was no doubt about that, we were good. I warned Laura before we left that plenty of guys would try to hit on her, and I trusted her to avoid anything that would disrespect either of us. I don't tolerate disrespect. My martial arts buddies call me the Hammer for a reason. They all know I can be a mean son of a, but Laura had never seen that side of me, and I hoped she never would. Something felt off before we even stepped out the door. Call it a gut feeling, or maybe a premonition. Why do you look like you just lost your best friend, Jake? Don't you want to go to the party? She asked, flashing me her most seductive smile. That smile always made my heart race. Honestly, babe, I'd rather skip the party this year, I replied, hoping she'd take the hint. Why, honey? I thought you always had fun at these things, she said while slipping on a pair of sheer black stockings. Don't be such a party pooper. We don't go out dancing often. I really need to let loose and have some fun. I'm almost ready. Come on, let's go. There was an edge of irritation in her voice at my hesitation. Something was off. She seemed way too excited about this damn party. It's just that last year's party got out of hand. There was way too much butt-grabbing going on. People start drinking and lose their minds. I get nervous in crowds. Ever since John became the vice president, he's been hitting on every woman in the office, and there's talk he's had a few affairs. I nearly knocked him out last time. I didn't like how he was all over you, and I especially didn't like how he danced with you. John's the president's nephew, a slimy piece of work who thinks he's God's gift to the world. He's married with 2 kids, and I genuinely pity his wife. She deserves a much better man than that sleazeball. I've watched him flirt with multiple women in ways that humiliate her at these parties. She hasn't come with him to one in the last couple of years. She's a classy lady and attractive too. I often wonder why she sticks with that arrogant clown. He's just a harmless flirt. I can handle him. Remember, I'm proud to be your woman. I love you more than life itself, you know that, right? You have nothing to worry about. Sure, he's tall, rich, and handsome, but he'll never be the man you are. You're my guy, and you always will be. I didn't care much for how she described that sleaze, but I let it go. Laura had never given me a reason to doubt her loyalty before. Love really does make you blind. Deep down, I knew my fate was sealed, there was no changing her mind about going. Sometimes, a man has to compromise a little to get what he wants in the long run. I certainly didn't want anything ruining my plans to make wild, passionate love with her once we got back home. We showed up to the party a bit late. A few folks were already halfway to being drunk. Music filled the air, and people were dancing, laughing, and generally having a good time. I figured I'd try to blend in and just hope the evening would wrap up sooner rather than later. As soon as we stepped inside, John Carter made a beeline toward us, offering me a limp handshake. It felt like shaking hands with a snake. His eyes raked over Laura as he took her hand and planted a long, deliberate kiss on it, acting like I wasn't even there. My blood pressure shot through the roof, and a headache started pounding in my skull. It would have taken just a little more for me to knock him out right then and there. I could tell this was going to be a long, miserable night. Laura gave me a quick wink to let me know everything was okay, so we moved into the crowd to mingle. Before long, John sauntered over and grabbed Laura's arm. She didn't resist. I felt a knot forming in my gut, and I wasn't sure how much more of this I could stand. "Let me introduce you to some of our new team members," he said with a grin that screamed trouble. He acted as if Laura belonged to him. "You don't mind, do you, Jake?" he asked, not waiting for my reply. Laura shot me that "please relax" look, so I clenched my jaw and let it slide. A buddy of mine, Tom, must have seen the whole thing because he pulled me away toward a group of guys playing some drinking game and swapping tall tales, while their wives milled around gossiping about whatever it is women gossip about. I nursed my drink, but I never actually got drunk. I like to keep my wits about me. As I hung out with my friends, I made sure to keep an eye on Laura. I saw her dancing with a few different guys, but nothing seemed out of line. I'm not sure how long passed, but I was itching to leave and take my wife home. It had been a couple of days since we'd been close, which felt like an eternity for us. I was glad she was having a chance to let her hair down, as she liked to say. I'd done my time at the party. But then, I couldn't find her anywhere. It was like she had vanished. I ran into her friend, Megan, and asked if she'd seen Laura. Megan looked a bit uneasy before saying she saw Laura dancing with John about 20 minutes ago. That made the hairs on the back of my neck stand straight up. That nagging, uneasy feeling I'd had all night tightened into a knot in my stomach. I started searching for her outside the main ballroom. As I approached a small, unused conference room, I heard voices. I decided to take a look inside. I could hear a woman moaning passionately, and my heart sank. It sounded just like Laura. My worst nightmare came true when I peeked inside. There she was, my loving wife, bent over the arm of a chair, being screwed by that slimeball himself. For a moment, I couldn't move. I thought I might be having a stroke. They were so wrapped up in what they were doing that they didn't even notice me standing there. I stepped closer, standing there like a statue until they finally realized I was watching. "Oh my God, Jake. Let me explain," she screamed, frantically trying to pull herself together. "You've got nothing to explain to me, you lying snake," I spat out, my voice dripping with venom. "I worshipped the ground you walked on, and this is how you repay me. We're done. You're not my wife anymore. Look at me." She couldn't lift her head, so I grabbed a fistful of her hair and forced her to face me. "What do you see? Do you see the eyes of the man who once loved you? No, what you see now are the eyes of a dead man. You killed my heart and soul tonight. Now I get why you were so desperate to come to this damn party. You didn't want to be with me because you were saving your cheating self for this dirtbag." At that, she let out a gut-wrenching cry. "No, I can explain," she begged. Don't even try to talk your way out of this. You've been caught red-handed. She looked terrified, her mouth opening to speak, but not a sound came out. While I was tearing into my soon-to-be ex-wife, Josh just stood there, looking downright amused. At that moment, 3 of my buddies, Tom, Greg, and Bill, walked into the room. I guess Megan had tipped them off that trouble was brewing. They stood there, frozen, not knowing what to say or do. I turned my attention to Josh. "And you piece of trash, I should end you right here. Go ahead, try it, and I'll have you arrested for assault," he sneered. "And my uncle will fire you on the spot. Maybe I should just kick your ass for fun. After all, I've had your precious wife several times already," he taunted, grinning wickedly. "You've been getting my leftovers after every holiday party for the last 5 years." He was practically spitting the words at me. "Screw you and your uncle," I growled. Right then, I made up my mind, I wasn't just going to humiliate him, I was going to make him suffer. And Laura, too. He might have been a few inches taller, but that didn't matter. I was ready to fight. The idiot had no clue what I was capable of. I allowed my rage to dull the pain as I looked at the woman I once would have gladly died for. We both knew what she'd done was beyond forgiveness. There would be no excuses, no turning back. Our life together was finished. As much as I wanted to end him right there, she wasn't worth spending the next 25 years in prison for. "You're mine now," I said, locking eyes with him. "You're gonna pay for your disrespect." I wasn't reacting how he expected, and I was blocking his way out on purpose. I could see him hesitating, trying to decide his next move. He thought he could bluff his way past me and pushed against my shoulder. Big mistake. I dodged his hand easily and delivered a quick punch to his gut. As he doubled over, I grabbed him by the neck and started slapping him with my open palm. The first slap sent his head spinning as he hit the floor. I lost track of how many times I slapped that now whimpering piece of trash. All right, please, stop. "No more, please," he cried, showing his true cowardly colors. "Not nearly enough, you scumbag. You'll regret the day you decided to mess with my wife. You took what was mine, and I'll make sure you pay. When I'm done, you'll be divorced and disgraced. I'm going to sue you for alienation of affection, and then I'm going after the company for your misconduct on company time. You might be rich, but you're about to be ruined. You messed with the wrong man. Get that through your head, the wrong man. If a man's voice could kill, mine would have right then." Just then, 2 police officers stepped into the room. I glanced at Laura. "I haven't forgotten about you," I said coldly. "You gave up a good man and a solid marriage for this worthless piece of garbage. You two deserve each other." "He attacked me. Arrest him. He's insane," Josh shouted at the officers, his voice cracking. But they seemed to already understand what was happening. "It was self-defense," said Tom, stepping forward. "Jake caught him screwing his wife, and he tried to go after Jake first." "Is that right?" one of the cops asked, looking at Greg and Bill. "Absolutely, officer," replied Greg. "Jake was just defending himself," added Bill. "They're lying. He assaulted me," Josh screamed, nearly hysterical. The officers turned to Laura, who was sitting there in shock. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Ma'am, are you all right? Did you see what happened?" one of them asked. She just sat there, crying, her hands covering her face. I felt absolutely no pity for her. The love I once had for her was now buried deep in the recesses of my mind. "Do you want to press charges against this man?" the sergeant asked, pointing at Josh. I could tell they sympathized with me, even though Josh was the one with the swollen face. "He came after me. He's nuts, I swear. I didn't do anything." Josh sputtered. "That's not what 3 witnesses saw," the other officer responded curtly. Officer, lock him up. I'm more than ready to press charges. Get him out of my sight, said the sergeant, giving me a look filled with empathy. If you ever need anything, just call the station and ask for Sergeant Miller. Trust me, I've been through something like this myself. I nodded silently, acknowledging his understanding. We'll catch up with you later, Jake, Tom said. Come on, guys, let's go. Jake has some things to handle here. Tom walked over to me, looking deep into my eyes. Then he pulled me into a tight hug. Hang in there, he whispered before leaving the room. Now, it was just the two of us. I picked up her panties off the chair and stuffed them into my pocket. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with them. Laura had finally calmed down. It was clear she was dreading what was about to come next. Truth be told, so was I. A coldness washed over me. Something inside me had shattered. It was a numbing sensation that made me feel detached from the woman I once loved. I didn't even recognize myself. I glanced at Laura, and for the first time, I understood that old saying, she looked like she had been ridden hard and put up wet. How does a man erase the woman he loves from his heart? I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that I would never be able to look at her the same way again. I had to cling to my anger, it was the only thing keeping my grief in check and holding on to what little sanity I had left. In that moment, I realized what my revenge would be. The wound she had inflicted on me would remain until the day I died. She had completely destroyed my world. Trust. That was gone. Nothing else mattered anymore. Grab your coat and meet me at the car. And make it quick, I ordered, turning my back on her and walking out of the room. I didn't want her to see the pain in my eyes. I didn't want her pity. This was the funeral for our love and marriage, and it was about to begin. As we sped off into the night, the silence inside the car was deafening. Are we heading home, Jake? She asked hesitantly. Home? I replied bitterly. We don't have a home anymore. When you broke our vows, you destroyed what we had. A home? It's just a house now, a place where I once felt happiness, a house where I loved and trusted a wife who used to be my best friend, I said, my voice unable to hide the sadness. She started to cry softly. Jake, is there any way you could ever forgive me? Please, I'll do anything. Just give me a chance. I'm so sorry, I really am, she whispered, her voice cracking. Do you think I can ever forget what I witnessed tonight? Or forget that piece of trash bragging about screwing you? You let that parasite have you, you gave him what was mine, over and over. When you did that, you ended our marriage. It means that the last 5 years have been one big, fat lie. A complete lie. Please forgive me, Jake. Believe it or not, I do love you with all my heart. I got caught up in the thrill of doing something I knew I shouldn't. I never thought about the consequences. It was just a stupid, childish game. He could never be the man you are. I was foolish and selfish. Let me make it up to you. Hit me, curse at me, do whatever you want, just don't leave me. I'll die without you. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. I yelled, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My emotions were spiraling out of control. I forced myself to calm down. A game? Messing with my life was a game to you? And you call that love? You love me, but you still go and sleep with another man? I slowed the car to a stop. Get out, I said firmly. Where are we? She asked, confusion and fear written all over her face. Get out. I snapped. Why? What's happening? Her eyes widened with alarm. Get your ass out of the car. Now. My tone left no room for argument. Laura hesitantly stepped out, following me toward the door. Mrs. Collins. Yes, how can I help you? My name is Jake Harris. I used to work for your husband's company. May I have a word with you? Is Josh okay? What's this about? I had a tight grip on Laura's arm as we stepped inside the house. Please, come in. Have a seat. She was the kind of wife I thought I had once. What I was about to do would cause her pain. Josh, however, would suffer even more. He should have known better than to cross me. To crush him and humiliate my soon-to-be ex-wife, I had to hurt his innocent wife too. I was driven by a primal instinct I can't even begin to explain. This won't take long, Mrs. Collins. My wife has something to tell you. I turned to Laura, and everyone's eyes followed. Tell her, I said, tightening my grip on her arm. She hesitated. Tell her. I demanded, squeezing her arm even harder. My husband caught me having sex with Josh tonight at the holiday party, she blurted out, as if the words were poison in her mouth. Tell her how long you've been screwing her husband. For the past 5 years, every holiday party, we found a way to sneak off and have sex, she confessed, breaking into tears. I acted like a slut, and I'm so sorry. Of course, that was just her version of events. She could have had multiple lovers or been seeing Josh more often than she admitted. But who cared at this point? Her ability to deceive for so long was already clear. Josh's wife looked more furious than shocked. Deep down, she always knew he was a jerk, but facing his adultery like this made her knees nearly buckle. She regained her composure, walked up to Laura, and slapped her hard across the face. Laura staggered back, clutching her cheek, stunned and in pain. Get that whore out of my house, she spat, her voice like ice. Once I'm done divorcing that worthless excuse of a man, you can have him, she said, glaring at Laura as if she were roadkill. I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, knowing that Josh would face hell when he got home, if he ever made bail. I was also painfully aware that Laura and I would be parting ways for good. It hurt just to look at her. I never imagined the day would come when my wife would need my protection, and I would refuse to give it. But life throws you curveballs. We were getting closer to her sister's house now. We're getting a divorce, I stated flatly, not even glancing in her direction. The house will be sold, and I'll take 70% of the equity. Our investments will be split equally, and we'll keep our own pensions. If you don't contest this, I won't use your adultery against you. Otherwise, I'll bring forth testimony from at least a dozen people who've known what you've been up to these past 5 years. I'm sure my 3 friends would gladly hammer the final nail into your coffin. They were there when I beat the hell out of Loverboy. And then, I'll mail the full transcript to every friend and family member you have, exposing you for what you truly are. Your choice. There's nothing I can do, Jake. Nothing, she said, her voice defeated, eyes hollow and desperate. You already know the answer to that, don't you? I replied coldly. My revenge on you is just beginning. It might last forever. What are you going to do to me? She asked, fear evident in her voice. I know you well enough to say this, you're basically a good woman who made a terrible lapse in judgment, costing us both dearly. I believe you love me, but that doesn't change anything. You were a good wife for the most part, but your selfishness has wrecked several lives. You're also manipulative and self-centered. I guess I chose to overlook that part of you throughout our marriage. I won't make that mistake again. Your guilt will become your shadow, it'll grow and eat you up when you finally realize I'm never coming back. You'll sink into depression and feel the weight of loss. You'll crave my forgiveness, but I want you to go to your grave burdened by what you've done, to me and to yourself, knowing that you are forever unforgiven. The car pulled up in front of her sister's house. Expect to hear from my lawyer soon. Don't go back to the house until tomorrow at noon. By then, I'll be gone. I'll come back to collect the rest of my things when you're not there. That's it, Jake. Over 8 years of marriage, and it's just over like that? She asked, her voice trembling. Yes, just like that. Goodbye, I replied. "Oh, and take these with you," I added, tossing her panties back to her. Tears streamed down her face as she got out of the car. I could feel my own tears starting to fall, but I stayed silent. The divorce with Laura was finalized in 6 months. Now, 8 months down the line, I sometimes wonder if I should have let her see my pain, if only to show her how much her actions had shattered my life. I knew I lost control that night I caught them. It's not something I'm proud of. I suppose I was a bit unhinged at the time. Since then, I've tried not to let myself grieve the death of our relationship. I needed to keep the pain locked away. But despite my efforts, the depression lingered. My subconscious mind kept tossing out questions that had no answers. In the first 6 months after our separation, she tried to call me numerous times. If she left a message, I erased it without listening. If I picked up and heard her voice, I immediately hung up. It was a form of self-defense. Despite everything, I knew I still loved her. She knew exactly how to get under my skin, and I couldn't risk that. My pride, my self-respect, everything depended on me staying strong. I couldn't allow her to hurt me again. The less angry I felt, the more vulnerable I became. My love for her hadn't disappeared, but I knew I couldn't be with her. Once the divorce was finalized, she stopped trying to reach out. What could she possibly say, anyway? "I love you." It was just a thrill, Jake. I was tempted, and I gave in. I didn't want to hear any more lies or excuses. Even if it had only happened once and she never told me, she'd still be complicit in his betrayal. Besides, the way she looked that night showed just how much she was enjoying herself. She signed the papers and didn't bother showing up at the final hearing. It was just as well, I didn't want to see her face again. I couldn't tell if her absence meant she was hurting and had accepted that our marriage was over, or if she simply didn't care at all. I used to think I knew her. But after what I witnessed, it felt like anything was possible. The image of her broken, defeated face the last time I saw her has been etched into my memory. Oddly enough, that image grows stronger over time, while the vision of her with that slimeball starts to fade. Despite knowing our love was a lie, I still find myself missing her. God help me, but I could never trust her again. There's no way to know if she ever truly loved me. Was she unfaithful even before we got married? Was I just a pawn in some grand scheme? I can't fathom how she could make a fool of me if she truly loved me. How could she disrespect me like that? These questions only made me feel confused and inadequate. I doubted if I could ever trust another woman again. I needed to find a way to break free from her hold on my life, but I didn't know how. My so-called revenge was nothing more than wishful thinking. It depended on her having loved me as deeply as I loved her. For all I know, she could have been chasing excitement the moment my back was turned. I didn't want to be the only one suffering. The harsh truth hit me, I never really knew her. I'd been in love with an illusion. Was it all just smoke and mirrors? These questions were driving me to the brink of madness. The death of our marriage came out of nowhere, like a sudden bolt of lightning followed by a crash of thunder. In a single night, my life as I knew it came to an end. When the story of what happened got out, some of our friends painted me as a heartless villain. Others thought I should have found ways to punish and humiliate her even more. None of that matters anymore. I'm not filled with rage anymore, I'm just lost. I don't want to dwell on the past, and right now, I have no plans for the future. I received $400,000 in hush money from the company president, with the agreement that I'd keep the company's name and his nephew out of the courts and newspapers. He even tried to offer me Josh's vice president position, but there was no way I could stick around. I couldn't stomach the looks from my former colleagues. Their faces said it all. Some pitied me, others thought I was foolish or weak for letting my wife cheat on me for so long. To those who had known me for years, I was either a victim or an idiot. Turns out, almost everyone was aware of what Laura and Josh had been up to, everyone but me. With the $150,000 I got from Josh to keep me from suing him for alienation of affection, my share of the house's equity, and my cut of our investments, I figured I wouldn't need to look for work anytime soon. I started drinking every day to drown out the loneliness and the emptiness that filled my life. One night, while I was drinking away my sorrows, I struck up a conversation with the bartender at my usual dive. His name was Tom. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and a face that looked like it had seen plenty of rough times. Tom was a straight shooter, and that's why I liked him. His eyes held the kind of wisdom that only comes from years of hard living. He was the guy you'd want on your side in a bar fight, steady and tough. He'd heard it all and probably done most of it. "Jake, I've never seen you drink this heavily before. I'm starting to worry about you, man. You're on your third scotch, and you haven't even been here for 15 minutes. I hope you don't mind me sticking my nose into your business, but you look like someone carrying a heavy load. It's a slow night. I've been tending bar long enough to know when a man needs to talk. If you want to, I'm here to listen." I was relieved to finally get it off my chest. I'd been having far too many conversations with myself. Tom listened as I spilled my story. He didn't say a word for a long time. "Your ex was in here a couple of weeks back, Jake," he finally said. She looked as stunning as ever, and to me, she didn't seem like she was grieving. She kept glancing around, much like you've been doing tonight. Maybe she was looking for you. Who knows, she might still love you in her own twisted way. Don't even try to make sense of it. She was with an older guy who walked and talked like he thought he was royalty. It was clear he had money and was used to getting his way. She didn't look particularly happy with him, but she didn't seem unhappy either. The fact is, you're sitting here drowning your sorrows, and she's out there living her life. A new image of Laura flashed in my mind. I could see her, smell that familiar perfume, hear that carefree laugh. It wasn't the broken woman I left behind, but rather the alluring, manipulative force of nature she used to be. So much for my so-called revenge. I wondered if she had felt even a fraction of the torment and loss that had been eating away at me since the night we split. I didn't say anything, just hung my head, lost in my thoughts. The grief I had been suppressing for so long suddenly washed over me like a tidal wave. I was powerless to hold it back. I was grateful that Tom was there. It felt like I was mourning something that had died long ago. Now, what I'm about to say is gonna sound harsh, but you've gotta hear it, Jake, Tom began. You need to suck it up. Your situation has changed, and you need to change with it. That's all there is to it. Grow up, get your body back in shape, and move on. On your feet, soldier, march or die. The answers to your problems aren't in the bottom of that bottle. You're stuck, and if you're not careful, you'll stay stuck, hiding in booze. You're this close to losing all respect for yourself. And if that happens, you'll only have yourself to blame. He leaned in closer, his voice firm but not unkind. The first thing you need to do is go get laid. Then go do it again. You're too good of a man to let some woman drag you down. Find yourself a real wild one, and screw her until you pass out. Clear your head and get on with your life, he advised, sounding like some strange mix of a friend, a counselor, and a drill sergeant all at once. My behavior felt pathetic, almost shameful. But I took Tom's advice. I quit drinking, started hitting the gym, and slept with every woman willing to give me the time of day. It wasn't about love, and most of the time, I couldn't even remember their names. Those casual encounters helped rebuild my self-esteem. We weren't making love, we were just connecting. They were the life rafts keeping me afloat when I felt like I was drowning. But I needed more than just physical connections. I needed to feel truly loved. As my health improved and my confidence grew, I noticed more women paying attention to me. It dawned on me then that I wasn't the root of Laura's behavior. If anything, I should have confronted her manipulative and self-centered ways a long time ago. Whatever drove her to act as she did had nothing to do with me. And once I came to terms with that, the heavy cloud of depression started to lift. I realized I needed to get out of town, away from her, away from everything that reminded me of our past. I bought a motorcycle, sold off or gave away most of my belongings, and headed south. No map, no plan, just the open road. I didn't care where I ended up because, in the end, every road leads somewhere. Once I was on the bike, I felt a sense of freedom that had been missing for years. Before leaving the state, I'd become one with the bike and the road beneath me. I was no longer just some desk jockey or a drunk, I felt like a modern-day cowboy. The motorcycle was my steed, powerful, sleek, and a little dangerous. It would respect me as long as I stayed in control. I was now a biker, and what lay ahead was far more important than anything I left behind. I was in charge of my own life again. The bike did exactly what I commanded, and my safety was entirely my responsibility. Those thoughts began to shape my whole outlook on life. As I rode, I could sense the rhythm of life around me, the slight changes in temperature as the terrain rose and fell, the smells of the countryside rushing by. For the first time in ages, it felt good to be alive. I found myself hoping there would be motorcycles in heaven, that would make dying not seem so bad. I was living fully in the moment. Yesterday's problems and tomorrow's uncertainties didn't matter anymore. Each mile brought me closer to a feeling of peace. The blast of wind in my face and the roar of the engine felt like music to my soul. I passed through countless small towns with quirky names, met all sorts of interesting, genuine people, and ate my fair share of greasy diner food. Some roads were smooth, some were rough, that's life, I guess. Eventually, I turned west. Just outside of Riverside, I noticed a woman frantically waving at me to stop. I pulled over and waited for her to catch up. She was alone, in the middle of nowhere. Average height, blonde, and quite pretty, even though she looked like she'd been through hell. Tears streamed down her face, and it was obvious someone had been roughing her up. "Please, help me," she cried, her voice breaking. Even in her disheveled state, there was something striking about her. Her green eyes seemed to pull me in, like warm, inviting water. "Sure. How can I help?" I asked cautiously, shutting off the bike. I wasn't sure what I was getting into. "I need a ride to Houston. My ex-boyfriend's on his way to my house, and he's threatening to kill my mother and daughter. Do you have a cell phone?" She asked, panic clear in her voice. I wanted to ask for more details, but the urgency in her tone left no room for questions. I handed her my phone, and she quickly called the police. She seemed slightly calmer after speaking with them. "You don't know me, and you've already been so kind, but could you give me a ride to my house? I'll guide you there. I just pray that maniac doesn't get there before the police. Please, hurry." Before I could even respond, she was already on the back of the bike, clinging tightly to me. We roared up the road, and I pushed my riding skills to the limit to get her back to her family. Pretty sure I broke every traffic law in the book. But it felt good to feel her arms around me. It felt good to be needed. I didn't even know her name, and I had no clue what we'd find when we arrived. If this guy had a gun, we could both be in deep trouble. When we pulled up to her house, the police were already there. They were wrestling with a man who was resisting arrest as they slapped the handcuffs on him. The woman jumped off the bike and sprinted toward the house. The man saw her and started shouting, "I'll get you. You'll see. They can't keep me locked up forever." He kept ranting even as they drove him away. "Mama, are you and Katie okay?" I was so worried, she cried, hugging her mother tightly. Just then, a cute little girl, about 8 years old, appeared at the doorway. "Mommy, you're back. Jack was here. He said he was going to kill us. Why does he want to hurt me and Grandma?" "Why, Mommy?" she asked, her innocent eyes wide with confusion. I stood there, feeling a bit out of place. The woman and her mother both noticed me standing awkwardly in the background. "Please forgive me," she said, turning to me. "I don't even know your name." "Jake." "Jake Harris," I replied, extending my hand. "And you are?" "This is my mother, Helen, and this little one," she said, wrapping her arm around the child, "is my angel, Katie. I'm Laura. Mama, Jake was kind enough to bring me here after Jack slapped me and left me stranded on the side of the road. I was terrified he'd lost it when I told him I wanted nothing more to do with him. I thought he was going to kill me. I'm very glad to meet you all, especially you, Katie," I said, smiling warmly at the little girl. "I'm just happy I could help. And please, call me Jake. Mr. Harris is my father," I added with a small grin. "I'm sorry it had to be under these circumstances, but I'm relieved they got that guy before he could hurt someone. He was acting like a complete lunatic." Before Laura could respond, Katie piped up, "Can you take me for a ride on your motorcycle, please? I like motorcycles." Laura looked at her daughter, then at me, clearly unsure how to respond. "Well, we'll see, Katie. If your mommy says it's okay, then it's okay with me." Helen stepped forward and offered her hand, which I shook. "Thank you, Jake. Would you like to stay for dinner? I think we owe you at least that much for your kindness." "I'd love to, Helen. It's been ages since I've had a good, home-cooked meal." "Well, I hope you're hungry." "Mom always cooks way too much," Laura said, a playful glint in her eye. "Are you married?" Katie asked innocently. "Nope, I'm not." "Why, are you thinking of proposing?" I said, kneeling down so I could look her in the eye. "I'm too little," she said thoughtfully. "But you could marry Mommy." We all chuckled at her innocent suggestion, feeling slightly embarrassed. "Katie, we just met Jake. He doesn't even know us," Laura replied in that special tone only a mother can use. "I know, but he has a motorcycle, and I like him." "Well, now that we've got that all settled, let's eat," Helen said, steering us toward the kitchen. I had just met these folks, yet it felt as if I were among family. Their sincerity and warmth, despite the trouble they'd been through, stirred something protective in me. There was a good energy in this house. I knew I needed to find out more about this Jack. He seemed dangerously unhinged, and I was genuinely worried about their safety. It didn't hurt that Laura was stunning, and little Katie was simply adorable. I resolved that as long as I was around, I'd make sure no harm came to either of them. Suddenly, my life had some direction again. I couldn't help but wonder how a nice woman like Laura had ended up with a guy like Jack. Then I thought, well, I ended up with someone like Laura too, didn't I? One bad choice can spiral into a mess of consequences. It occurred to me that fate can be both cruel and kind. I felt lucky to have crossed paths with her. Life had clearly knocked her around a bit, and I knew that feeling all too well. When the time was right, I'd dig deeper into the situation. Something told me Jack was going to be a problem. Dinner was served, and both Laura and her mother seemed pleased to see how hungry I was. The food was delicious, and I ate like a man having his last meal. As we ate, I shared a bit about my background, how my divorce had left me drifting aimlessly on my motorcycle for months, trying to piece my life back together. They listened with empathy, nodding as I spoke. I liked them, and I got the sense that they liked me too. Both Laura and Helen kept giving me these subtle, appraising glances, as if they were trying to figure out what kind of man I really was. Little Katie, though, seemed to have already made up her mind. She sat next to me, reaching out to touch my arm now and then. It warmed my heart and brought a smile to my face. I looked at Laura and asked, "So, how did you end up involved with Jack?" "I don't like Jack," Katie interjected. "He's a mean man, and he hit Mommy." Laura's face took on a pained and embarrassed look as she realized just how much her relationship with Jack had impacted her daughter. "At first, he seemed considerate and kind," she began. "I didn't love him, but he was decent company in the beginning. I knew he wasn't right for me, but I was lonely and needed someone to talk to. Then, it changed. He started drinking heavily and didn't want me talking to my friends or family. He even treated Katie like she was just a nuisance. I couldn't, and wouldn't, put up with that kind of abuse. When I told him it was over, he got violent. He said if I met him one last time, he'd leave us alone. That's how I ended up on the side of the road. Thank God you showed up when you did. Is he Katie's father? I asked, bracing myself for the answer. No, my husband Mark is Katie's father. He was killed in Iraq. It's just been the two of us since then, for over 3 years now. I've only known Jack for about a month. That's all it took for things to get this messy. My advice? Head to the courthouse on Monday and get a restraining order. He threatened you in front of the police, so they'll issue one automatically. That way, if he comes near you or your family, he'll be arrested immediately. I want to ride the motorcycle. Katie chirped, cutting through the tension in the way only a child can. All right, I'm sure Jake will take you for a ride, Laura said with a smile. But if you're finished eating, go watch some cartoons. I want to talk to Jake a little more, okay? Come on, sweetie, let's go see what's on TV, Helen suggested, taking Katie's hand. Okay, Mommy. See you later, Jake. She called out as she skipped away. Your daughter is something special. She really gets to me. I think she looks a lot like you, I said, watching her disappear into the other room. Katie is my angel, Laura replied, her eyes softening. If anything ever happened to her, I'd be done for too. I honestly don't know how I would have survived these past couple of years without her. I understand, I said, reaching out to take her hands in mine. It felt like the most natural thing to do. And in that moment, something magical happened. I swear, the warmth from her hands shot up my arm, rattled around in my head, and pierced right through my heart. I wanted this woman. All I could see were her eyes, and I was lost in them. We were communicating without saying a single word. I knew she felt it too. Something powerful was happening, and it scared me a little. It's getting late. I should probably find a place to crash for the night, I said, standing up, suddenly feeling nervous. My life was shifting again, and I was trying to keep up. We have plenty of room here, Jake. Why don't you stay? She suggested. Katie would love it. Really? What about you? I asked, though I already knew her answer. Yes, I'd love it too, she said, her voice soft and sincere. I feel safe when you're around. You're like my knight in shining armor, riding in to save me on your motorcycle. We'd be glad to have you here until you get back on your feet. Her smile lit up the room. She clearly thought I was broke, which meant it wasn't my money she was after. I accept, I said, smiling back. I noticed your house could use a few repairs. I'd be happy to take care of that for you, if you'd like. That would be wonderful, Jake. It'll be nice to have you around for a while, she said warmly. By the way, it's Friday night. Do you know of any place we could go dancing? Nothing too fancy, I don't have much to wear. Yep, I know just the place, she said, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Let's see. She began sizing me up, looking me over. My husband, Mark, was about your build. I never could bring myself to get rid of his clothes. I'll show you where they are. If you find anything that fits, feel free to use it. I need to go get ready myself. Come on, I'll show you to the guest room. There's a bathroom in there if you want to shower. It's a country bar, so you don't need to get too dressed up. She disappeared down the hallway and came back about an hour later. Wow, I muttered when I saw her. She had really cleaned up nicely. Laura was wearing a pair of jeans that fit her perfectly, high-heeled boots, and a top that hugged her curves, highlighting her beauty. A simple string of pearls adorned her neck, and her hair was pulled back into a ponytail. She looked breathtaking, somehow managing to appear both youthful and mature at the same time. "You look absolutely stunning," I blurted out, the dumb smile on my face giving away how I felt. "I'm just a simple country girl," she replied playfully. "If that's true, then I'm in love with the country," I said, wanting to kiss her right there and then. She beamed at the compliment, and I felt like I'd just hit the jackpot. I couldn't help but wonder how she'd handle the attention she was sure to get tonight. The last time I went out with a beautiful woman, well, we all know how that turned out. "Thank you, kind sir. You're looking quite handsome yourself," she said with a hint of nervousness as she headed for the door. "I think we make a very cute couple. Shall we go?" I took the opportunity to admire her shapely hips as she walked. I was having a hard time controlling my growing attraction to her. There wasn't a single thing about her that I didn't like. It was too early to call it love, but I was definitely knee-deep in lust and admiration. The club turned out to be bigger than I had expected. Heads turned to follow Laura as we walked in. She moved as if she didn't even realize how stunning she was. The band was in full swing, with people dancing, tapping their feet, laughing, and smiling. Laura showed me how to two-step and a few other country dances. I was having a blast and found myself developing a genuine liking for country music. When the tempo slowed, I made sure to pull her close, feeling more and more like this woman was meant to be with me. I needed her to feel the same way. We took a break, sat down with a couple of beers, and started talking. She politely turned down offers to dance from other men. I learned that she had a degree from the University of Texas and worked as a teacher. Her late husband had been a captain in the army when he was killed in action. She told me she never thought she could love again after losing him. I knew that feeling all too well. It was how I felt after the end of my marriage. Laura excused herself to use the ladies' room, and I watched her as she made her way through the crowd. Several guys tried to chat her up or buy her a drink, but she brushed them off without so much as a smile. I liked what I saw. "Thanks for flagging me down today," I said when she came back. "Meeting you is the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. I know we just met, but something about us feels right. It's like our spirits already know each other." "I feel the same way, Jake," she replied, her eyes meeting mine. "But there's something you need to know about me. Any man in my life would have to accept two things. First, Katie is my world. We're a package deal. And the love I have for Mark is still there and always will be, even though he's gone. Do you understand? A man in my life would have to share me with his memory. Are you man enough to handle that?" I looked down for a moment, gathering my thoughts, then raised my eyes to meet hers again. Taking her hands in mine, I spoke with absolute certainty. "Absolutely," I said without hesitation. "I can't imagine being away from you. I've always wanted to be with a woman capable of loving that deeply. I respect what you're saying, and I know Mark was a good man. I just hope there's room in your heart to love again. If I were in his place, that's exactly what I'd want." "I think I could, Jake," she said softly. "The love I have for Mark will always be special and will always have a place in my heart. But I've got a big heart, and I know there's room for more love in there." She was looking at me, hope in her eyes, as if trying to reassure herself of my sincerity and my willingness to stand by both her and Katie. When we got back to her house, I stopped her at the door and turned to face her, gazing deeply into her eyes. "Can I have a hug?" I asked, opening my arms. She stepped forward, and I embraced her tightly. I began kissing her gently, again and again. The scent of her drove me wild. I never wanted it to end. Cradling her face in my hands, I whispered, "You're very special. I just wanted you to know that." We kissed again, this time more deeply and passionately. That night, sleep didn't come easily. As I lay in bed, my thoughts raced with images of Laura and everything that had happened that day. I realized then that I wasn't homeless anymore. My place was here, with her. A few moments later, the door creaked open. Laura slipped quietly into the room and climbed into bed beside me. Without saying a word, she pressed up against me, her warmth calming my nerves. I started to speak, but she silenced me with her fingers on my lips. I couldn't hold back any longer. I began kissing her neck, feeling my passion urging me to claim her as mine. I resisted the urge for as long as I could because I wanted this night to be one she'd always remember. We made slow, tender love, our souls intertwining in a bond one knew would last. 9 weeks passed. Jack's trial for assault and resisting arrest was approaching, and if he managed to make bail, I knew he'd be back. Laura didn't talk much about her fear of him, but I sensed it in the way she held me at night. We slept together every night, our lovemaking bringing out the best in me, the part of myself I liked most. Our needs perfectly complemented each other. She needed a protector, a lover, and a provider. I needed someone worth protecting, someone to love, and someone who gave me purpose. Thoughts of my life with Emma faded into a distant memory. I could think about her now without feeling any emotion. In fact, I even found myself wishing her well, hoping she'd find her own path to happiness. Laura would slip out of bed early each morning, not wanting to set a bad example for Katie. "So, when are you going to ask her?" Helen asked casually one morning as I sipped my coffee. "Ask her what?" I replied, nearly spilling my drink in surprise. "If I've ever seen two people who belong together, it's you and Laura." "And Katie adores you," Helen said, turning from the sink to look at me. "You do know she loves you, right? I never thought I'd see her this happy again." "I know. I love her too. And Katie. And you as well," I said, walking over to give her a warm hug. "I feel at home here. But we haven't known each other that long. I don't want to rush things, you know. Maybe I should tell her I love her, huh? What do you think?" "I don't want to meddle," she said, patting my shoulder gently before leaving the kitchen, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night, as I waited for Laura in my room, I made up my mind. I was going to bring up the topic of marriage with her. I knew she was the one. It was crucial that she understood what marriage meant to me this time around. Before we made any public vows, we needed to make sacred promises to each other. I resolved not to hold back my feelings, as I had in my first marriage. Suddenly, I heard a piercing scream. It was Laura. My gut told me immediately, Jack was in the house. I reached into the drawer by my bed and pulled out the 9mm Glock I had bought as soon as I met the residency requirements. I wasn't about to face a gunfight with empty hands. Clad only in my underwear, I rushed to Laura's room. Bursting through the door, I saw Jack on top of her, trying to assault her. She was struggling, calling out my name. I pressed the pistol against the back of his ear. "Stand up real slow. If you so much as twitch, you're dead. I'd love nothing more than to blow your brains out, and I just might do it anyway." As he got to his feet, his pants slid down to his ankles. He made a move to pull them up. "Leave them there. If you try anything, I'll put you down." I glanced at Laura. "Call the police. Tell them Jack broke into your house and tried to assault you. And make sure Katie and Helen stay in their rooms." Turning back to Jack, I barked, "Move." He shuffled toward the front door, his pants tripping him up with every step. When we reached the door, I ordered him to get on his knees. "Are you ready to die, Jack? You picked the wrong family to mess with, and you're going to pay for attacking Laura and threatening her loved ones." Who are you?" he croaked out. "I'm a knight in shining armor, Jack," I replied, my voice steady and low. I cocked the gun, pressing it hard against his skull, tightening my grip on his collar. "Say your prayers, scumbag. You're about to meet your maker." There was a long, tense silence. Then, he heard the hammer click down. He pissed himself right there on the floor. What he didn't know was that I'd already removed the magazine. There wasn't a bullet in the chamber. If you ever come near Laura or her family again, the gun will be loaded next time. That's a promise. The police arrived shortly after and hauled him away. Given that he was a repeat offender, he was looking at a solid 10 years with a guy named Bubba for a roommate. I don't think he'll ever want to cross paths with me again. After the cops left, I stood by the door in nothing but my boxers, holding the gun in my hand. Laura, Katie, and Helen came rushing over, all talking at once. Katie grabbed onto my legs while Laura and Helen hugged me tightly. Okay, ladies, he's gone. And he's not coming back, I assured them, my voice firm. You're safe now. I promise, you always will be. 3 months later, Laura and I were married. A year after that, our son, Mark, was born. He's the spitting image of me. Katie was over the moon about having a baby brother. I asked Tom to be his godfather, and he was honored to accept. He's become a part of our family. Laura is back to teaching, and Helen watches the kids during the day. We bought a new house, and I opened up a Subway franchise. I adopted Katie, and now she rides with me all the time. That girl's got motorcycles running through her veins. I learned that when life takes you down some rough roads, the only solution is to find a new path. And now, I'm happy.